You have before you a motion to approve a resolution for 100% CT, a clean energy concept program that was designed by our very own Clean Energy Task Force. Very interesting target for the town to set, and we're excited to hear about it. And I invite Tom Roy and Mark Scully to tell us a little bit about the proposal and what it means. And I do want to recognize the Clean Energy Task Force and working with the town of West Hartford. I think they've been leading this across the state, so it's an exciting project, and appreciate the leadership of our volunteers on these boards.
Tonight's presentation, I'm just going to steal a little of Mark's thunder. Needs to be kept in context of what this is. The best way to describe it is this is the concept car of the future. This is what electricity and energy use could look like in 30 to 35 years. But by studying it and looking at it now, it gives you the opportunity to learn and see and hopefully advance things at a faster pace than we would otherwise. So with that, Mark, jump in.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. Mark Scully, 29 Notch Road, West Simsbury, and as you said, representing the Clean Energy Task Force. We're really excited to have this opportunity to present this project to you. You will have a copy of these slides afterwards. And as Tom said, this is a project. It's really it's a concept project, and what we did at the Clean Energy Task Force, we stepped back from the daily struggles or the daily issues of this solar panel array on the school and this one over at the landfill, and said, let's look forward a little, let's look ahead. And if we tried to be more ambitious and said we want to get to a real utopian level of 100% of our energy coming from renewables, could we do it? Where would we find obstacles? Let's do the math. So that's really what we did. I would point out that the definition of 100% renewable is a little different than you might hear sometimes in the press. You'll hear some towns and cities say we're 100% renewable, and what that often means is that they're either generating enough electricity, or and sometimes they're just buying it, or they're buying offsets, and they're saying that we're therefore 100% renewable. Ours really is a more holistic approach to not just generating the electricity, but dealing with the intermittency of renewables. How does the grid need to change so that we can accommodate all those renewables? So it's a much more really complete project. We've been working on this project about a year, so we're very thrilled to present this to you. There are four pillars or four key steps in the project. The first is let's take stock, let's benchmark our current energy use. And that is the whole town. It's not just the town of Simsbury municipal buildings, it's residences, it's businesses, and it's everything. It's electricity, heating, cooling, transportation. Second, before we start to look at how much we can produce in renewables, let's see how we can reduce our need. So we look at the time frame here is sort of out to 2050. What kind of changes could we make with very aggressive adoption of deep energy retrofits? Switching, what they call fuel switching, switching our heating and cooling over to efficient heat pumps, much more modern net zero design of construction, switching our transportation over to electric. So fairly ambitious, using all the technology that does exist today, how much could we reduce our demand? And then third, and this is a key part of the project, really going through, looking at the town, how much could we produce, how much renewable energy could we produce in town? In Simsbury, that's primarily solar photovoltaics, solar panels that produce electricity. We don't have a good wind resource. We don't have a lot of hydro here, so it's really going to be solar panels. So we literally went rooftop by rooftop and said, and parking lot by parking lot, and said, how much could we fit in town? That was a big part of the project. Could we even get close? Could we do it? And then finally, as I said, the grid would need to change. We can't just keep adding solar. We can't just keep adding intermittent renewables to the grid as it's currently designed. So we're working collaboratively with Eversource to look at how that grid would need to be designed. So as I said, we start by benchmarking our current energy usage. We got our electricity data from Eversource. We got our natural gas data from Connecticut Natural Gas. We got a list of buildings from the assessor, and we looked at how many of those buildings use heating oil. We made some assumptions about how many gallons of heating oil are burned a year. We got a list of vehicles in town. We made some assumptions about how many miles are driven per year, miles per gallon. We converted everything to a common currency, gigawatt hours, and then added it all together. And you can see now, while the total may not mean
a lot to you. The distribution was kind of surprising and quite an education for us, that about 40% of our energy right now comes from transportation, about 40% from heating, if you put together natural gas and oil, and about 20% from electricity. And the presentation that you'll have and will be available to the public has got some of the details in there. Next step, as I said, is how much could we reduce that by if we really got serious about conservation and efficiency using technology that is currently available. Things like energy efficient appliances and light bulbs, modern building, and not just for new construction, because that's less of an issue going forward than the energy retrofits that we can do. Switching over vehicles to electric vehicles. And you can see from the numbers here, there is potential for significant savings in our energy. Really about a 2/3 reduction from about 934 gigawatt hours down to 325. I'm not going to say these are the exact right numbers. A lot of assumptions made in here. This is a work in progress. It's a concept car, as Tom said. These numbers will change as we get better estimates, as we get better at doing this, but it is our first estimate, first honest estimate at how much we could reduce the energy that we currently consume. Then, as I said, the third stage was how much could we produce in town? And so we had a summer intern using a tool called Helioscope, which is what a solar installer would use to produce a quote for a company or a residence. The picture in the upper right is the Stop and Shop Hoyts complex. The other two pictures are not in town, but they're representative of what we could do when we start using parking lots also for solar or some undeveloped land. So this was also a lot of assumptions went into this work, but we did our first estimate. Again, we went through the building list. There's 9,395 buildings we looked at. We divided them into categories. We didn't model each house. We made a lot of assumptions there, but we did model all of the large commercial buildings, we looked at parking lots. We actually modeled a few parking lots. We made some estimates of what other potential lots could be available. And then we had some very rough estimates of what pieces of land, how much potential there might be in land in town to put some solar on some land. The number we came up with in our first estimate is 118 gigawatt hours of annual production, which is about a third of what we're going to need. So the other 2/3 we would look to get from regional renewable sources, so utility scale solar, offshore wind from Connecticut. So this was, as I say, it's been an educational process to get a rough estimate of how much we could produce in town. So this graph sort of puts it all together. The bars on the left build up from our current consumption, electricity, gas, oil, transport, getting to that 934 of our current consumption. Then we work our way down from there with these efficiency measures through electricity, heating, transport, getting to that 325. Then we figure we can produce about a third of that, 118 locally, and the rest comes from regional. So as I say, these are first estimates. The last step of the process is we need to look at the grid, because the grid as it's currently designed is set up for big central power plants. They could be coal, they could be natural gas, it could be nuclear, sending electricity in one direction out to businesses, to residences. And increasingly in the future, that model is changing, because we now have what we call prosumers, people who produce and consume. They've got solar on the rooftop. You've got businesses producing solar. You've got much more distributed generation of electricity. It's intermittent. You've got storage. You've got combined heat and power. You've got fuel cells. So there needs to be multi-directional flows of electricity. We need to deal with the intermittency issue. We need some form of storage. Demand response is a way of not treating how much we use as a fixed amount, but as peak hours and peak rates of electricity change, we might shift some of the loads. We do our washing and drying at night, or in fact, businesses could shut down certain lines of their production or we could shift pumping of water to times when the rates are lower. So this is a key part of the project, and we're working very closely with Eversource and a nonprofit called Clean Coalition. They've got expertise in this area of how to design the grid, how to rethink the grid. So our goal is to work with Eversource to devise some kind of a pilot project for what would be called a community microgrid. So as Tom said, this is a concept car. This is a sort of forward-thinking project. We're not talking right now about specific policies or technologies, but some ways that as we progress, as the project moves forward, that you might be hearing from us. We've outlined a few here. We're already starting to see some pathways, some technologies, and some obstacles in the way. A goal of the project is maybe by mapping out the big picture and how we might get there, we might actually see some solutions that we can't see right now. And we might actually be motivated to actually doing it if we think it's possible. So as I said, we're working with Eversource to develop a pilot microgrid. As the Clean Energy Task Force has done, we will continue to do programs that promote and educate on things like renewable energy, heat pumps, energy efficient retrofits, commercial, as you mentioned, we have a small business energy program going on now. Shared solar, as you know, we have a proposal for a shared solar facility on the landfill. That's a part of the solution. At some point, we might start to talk about electric vehicle charging infrastructure in town. One of the key ways that we're using this project now is some of the aspirational goals of this project we'd like to build into our plan of conservation and development, which is being updated. So as you mentioned, Alicia, the project really came out of the Simsbury Clean Energy Task Force. We've been working with West Hartford. We've got other towns expressing interest in starting to do this type of work. We've had several partners. We're actually working through the nonprofit People's Action for Clean Energy. Acadia Center is a policy house with offices in Hartford. Clean Water Action is helping disseminate to other towns. We've had students from Yale. This Clean Coalition I mentioned has the expertise in the grid. The Institute for Sustainable Energy at Eastern Connecticut State has a Sustainable Communities program, and they're building some of our work into the energy module there. So we're excited about the work, and one of the reasons we're here with this resolution is that Eversource, in order to keep going with Eversource, they'd sort of like to know that it's not just a couple of people on the Clean Energy Task Force, but that the town is aware about this. So we welcome the chance to entertain any of your questions.
Well, let me answer the question before they ask the first question. Any commitments made tonight, zero impact on the budget. This is simply saying that we support the direction that they're going.
You read our minds.
That one was pretty obvious, but I have a copy of Mark's presentation here as well as a draft letter, assuming that we move forward with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, wow, that was a great presentation.
Yeah.
And also,
impressive.
the inventorying of the town was a lot of work, and appreciate Tom and the intern and the task force working together on that. That's a great first step in sort of inventorying where we are and what we can do. And it's very exciting to think that there might be a path going forward, and I'm excited to support you in this because I think this is great work by the task force and by the Public Works, and thanks to West Hartford as well, who's working with you.
All right.
Questions from the board?
I would echo. It's overwhelming almost in terms of trying to absorb it. So really great work. Mark, I really like the idea of integrating this into the Plan of Conservation and Development because so much lives from that document that I think it's just a great way of carrying it forward.
They're both very aspirational. It's not a detailed policy technical document.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So could you just explain a little bit more? When you say a pilot microgrid with Eversource, just a little bit, I completely missed what that meant. I assume it's an infrastructure component with them, but could you say a little bit more about that?
Right. Now, you have a rough sketch of one it's in the appendix. It's page 18. I think it's the very last page. But the idea is that within our town, and Tom, you may want to supplement what I'm saying here, but we'll take one of our substations, and instead of power just coming from a central source, from Eversource, and then supplying us, we'd actually manage the circuits that are at that substation as a separate grid. So we'd have some critical facilities on there. We'll have solar generation. We'll have a bunch of rooftops. We may have some parking canopies. So we'll actually be producing energy locally. We may have some generators or storage, and we'll have probably tiers of users. As I say, we'll have some critical, we'll have the police station, we'll have a gas station, we'll have some medical facilities. And the idea is that we're managing the flows in different directions on that grid. Potentially, we could what they call island. So if we lost power entirely, we could actually operate at least portions of that microgrid as a self-standing, self-sufficient facility during longer storms. So resiliency is one of the nice
I was going to say, it sounds like it
benefits.
would reduce vulnerability
Right.
to natural disaster or, God forbid, anything else.
Maybe something like we've dealt with a few years ago.
I don't say
I've
it.
already knocked on the wood here. We actually, a few years ago, worked on a grant program with Connecticut DEEP where we did actually investigate a microgrid for the center of Simsbury. And just as Mark was saying, what we were looking at is the ability to island off this facility, the fire department, drugstore, supermarket, library as a shelter, and the water pollution control. And we went pretty deep in investigating the ability of using our existing electrical generation from all of the emergency generators to power up all of these facilities. So in the event of a regional power outage, you would essentially go into island mode and you would operate a number of buildings essentially the same way we operate one building now.
So if we did, I know we talked about a solar project on the landfill and, a lot of bigger solar projects. Wouldn't that bolster this? I mean, if
Absolutely.
that's one of those projects that, we could work into this overall
Absolutely.
community
Yes.
development. And so all these solar panels, I'm trying to get the concept of what contributes to the power that goes to the island. Would that just be like public solar panels, like on public buildings, or are you thinking that that's residential users also? And
Residential be businesses, some of the big box stores, some of the any commercial, any building that has enough load, has a flat roof and has enough structural load that they can handle the panels. We think one of the most interesting possibilities is these parking lots, these canopies. We can see one over at the school parking lots. For a number of reasons. One, it's real estate that is not currently being used for farmland, or you're not generally hurting the aesthetics. I mean, one of the important, I think, goals of this project is let's start to have these conversations so that we can add solar over time without destroying the aesthetic of the town or without taking farmland away. Let's sort of start to think this through already. But parking lots, some might be town properties, town-owned solar, but it's really everything. One of the things Eversource was kind of excited about is when we said we're actually doing this, what they call a solar siting survey, they were curious, well, how much, where are you putting this? Because solar is a bit of a nuisance for them, right? It's much easier for them. They can turn on, a gas power plant on and off much more predictably and stably. Solar is intermittent, wind is intermittent, the sun doesn't shine at night and you get a cloudy day and production's on. So it's much harder for them. So if we can help them sort of plan a grid like that, they might be interested.
And if you could imagine, it's been in the news, it's been very public, some of the challenges on a national level with the electric grid. Mm-hmm. It's critical infrastructure which has really not been modernized. And one of the challenges that Eversource has is, as Mark said, there's a number beyond solar and wind and local generation capabilities. The grid is not set up to handle that as it was originally designed, and so now they're struggling with all of a sudden you have a community putting solar up everywhere. How do they handle that extra power during the day? They hadn't anticipated not selling the electricity, so they have to control their generation. So looking forward, and part of where this is exciting is saying, okay, how are we going to develop a system to handle flow in both directions? And how are we going to change the grid from thinking sending power out and that's it to handling multiple sources of energy coming in at different times?
The microgrid is not a new invention. It's been actually done within the United States, not in Connecticut. But if you go out to the West Coast, you'll find also smart grids.
Right.
They can actually anticipate loads and work with things. So,
as far as programs that we can promote as a town, we have done the solar project and stuff. Can you explain how heat pumps would fit into that? And what exactly would the average homeowner do to have?
Right. Heat pumps, or there's something called renewable thermal, are they're basically running. They're like a refrigerator, running in reverse. You're basically pulling heat. Well, there's air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. Ground source would be pulling the heat out of the water in the ground. Air source is literally they're harvesting heat out of the air. And even when the weather's cold, because of the compression technology, they're able to pull the heat out of the air and then bring that into your house. So it's pure electric. You're not burning anything, and they're about 4 times more efficient, except when temperatures get very low. But they're generally about 4 times more efficient than, say, a natural gas or any kind of a.
You can buy those now, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think I have one in my house.
Further
Very
south, most
excited
people
about
have
this, so that's why I was hoping we were talking about the same thing. But I know there are restrictions on when it's effective, but he gets very excited running around going, I'm turning off the oil!
Yeah. And you know what? That almost should be the charge that we should have ended with, which is we're turning off the oil, we're thinking differently.
Yeah.
There's newer technologies out there. And the side that I probably get the most excited about is when you start looking at using less energy as an overall commodity. And I keep going back to the car analogy, and it may be because I've been at the highway garage too much the last few days. But if you look back in the 1950s and what a car took to travel a mile for fuel versus what we're getting today, and that's kind of when you look at our homes and our businesses and everything else, those same levels of reduction are possible.
And some of this may seem very utopian, but we know with technology, it will get less expensive, it will get better. So,
Well, the
some of
types
this,
of solar cells they're now coming out with,
Yeah.
clear glass, I mean, the opportunities aren't just on flat roofs in 2050.
You also have to understand that Simsbury already is sitting in a lead position in the solar. I mean, we're ranked number 4 in the state, and that's 169
Close to the podium.
towns. We already have a community that supports this.
We do indeed. And I know Tom in the past has looked at solar on bike trails and power generation through bike trails. So that is something, I think the Netherlands do that, right? Is that where you were telling me?
Yeah, and what's interesting, even when you look at, go back to the graph where it talks about the energy that we use in Simsbury, and it's kind of interesting how it all ties in. We had the piece for transportation, and I'm sure there'd be folks on our bike head committee that would tell you that's one way
Yes.
of reducing. And same thing when you look at the POCD, how you develop your town can change what you need to do in terms of transportation.
So I'd like to congratulate this board who adopted the Complete Streets resolution that is being incorporated into the POCD, which is also related to the reducing of transportation expenditures and energy.
So I'd say as a big wrap-up, I think the more you talk about it and you see the work that Mark did with the Clean Energy Task Force, it really ties in really the direction that this board has been going for years and the community as a whole. And what the ask is tonight is for a resolution with no financial binds, no long-term commitments, but simply that we support the direction that this program can possibly take us.
Right, are there any other questions? Board? All right. With that, may I have a motion to approve the resolution for 100% CT Clean Energy Concept Program and to authorize the first selectman to sign the letter to Eversource?
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.